All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the work session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, January 10, 2022. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Galani,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper,
Here.
Councilmember Jaxie,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Bros,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher, Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
All right, thank you, and welcome again on a warm Wildwood evening. Before we get to action items under information, we have 11. Is there anything under information that any member of the council would like to discuss before we move into action items? Councilmember Bartoni.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this question is for Joe or for Steve or for both. It's regarding the internet and just like the work we've got now going on with Spectrum. As you probably both are aware, there was a lot of emails after the last session from a lot of different residents. I'm just kind of curious as to what did those emails, did those addresses get sent to Spectrum? Just help me understand what we're doing for those residents.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cross, would you like to answer Councilmember Bartoni's question relative to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Bartoni, yes, we are communicating with Spectrum and pulling together that information. I have quite a bit of feedback from not only residents, but HOAs as well as council members. So I am in the process of assimilating that to send to them. We do have a bit of an issue, however, in that contract has not been executed yet. And a couple things. Number one, they had not executed it. Number two, new final guidelines came out from Treasury regarding the use of ARPA funds, and that has also slowed down their executing of the contract. So we don't want to go too far until we know absolutely certain that they're going to sign the contract.
Okay, do we have any reason to believe they're not going to sign the contract?
No.
Thank you.
No.
Okay. I'm hearing a buzzing noise from some kind of fan that seems to have a major heat source with it. So that's all right. Okay. Councilmember Bartoni, any follow-up to that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
One of the follow-ups would have been like, why hadn't they signed it?
The reason I just saw an email on that today, the reason they haven't signed it is because it's got to get to the right person. They're obviously a large company. It's got to get to the right person to be signed, apparently. And that's about it. And the holidays.
Okay. And the other follow-up I would have, if I can, please, would be were there any significant changes from the federal government that you just alluded?
City Attorney Young, would you please respond to that question?
We are in the process of reviewing the final rule that was implemented within the last several days. There's nothing in the agreement that runs afoul of those final rules, and it is generally consistent therewith, but it does broaden the application that we could use the funds for.
Okay, thank you.
And you may recall there was a motion passed by the council in addition to approval of the agreement with Spectrum to pursue an additional agreement relative to some of the sections of the city that were not, at least initially, within the scope of the larger contract. And so to the extent those regulations have been changed, that the federal regulations have been changed that allow for the funds to be used for residents that, for example, and I'm just throwing this out, I don't know if this is the case, that may not have the same minimum speed upload, download requirements, that would be good for the city. But we're still assessing that. And when we have the determination on that, certainly the council and the public and our residents will be made aware of that. But I think it does bode well for that second motion that the council passed. Do you agree or disagree with that, City Attorney Young?
I agree with that, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Bartoni, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Anyone else want to ask questions or comment about anything under information before we move to action? Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yeah, I'm not sure who this goes to, but the CDBG funds in the past have been used for senior programming. And I'm not opposed at all what it's being used for, but my question is, are we going to continue to fund senior programs and how are we going to do that?
City Administrator Cross, do you want to respond to that?
Actually, that would, Mr. Mayor, that would either be Mr. Vunich or Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown is handling those CDBG funds, but either one of them would be able to speak to, rather we will be able to, and I guess probably Mr. Vunich about the senior programming. So,
Rick Brown?
Well, Mr. Mayor, what I would say is we have used them, in fact, for curb ramp replacement work, at least since I've been with the city over the last 6-7 years, at least a couple times. So we have done it previously, but as you point out, more recently, we have used them for senior programming. And I think that could be done in the future. Department of Planning has taken the lead with the application for those funds. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe if he wants to add anything further.
Thank you, Mr. Benich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the most recent application for community development block grant funds did identify senior programming again for 2022 as the recipient of that $25,500. So occasionally we rotate around just to ensure that we're spending the money in appropriate places at all times. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there will be funding for senior programming this year.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember McCutcheon. Anyone else? Anything under information before we go to action items? One question that I have relates to the reserve at Wildwood. We haven't seen much on that in a while. It kind of seems like it's languishing. Mr. Benich, do you have any update on that?
Well, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, Mr. Cross and I discussed that today. There have been like 3 parts to the process. The first was the agreement from the developer for access to the property, which then was followed by an addendum from the property owners for the same access. That all has generally been accomplished. The consultants that we have been using, both are unavailable now. Andy Berg from Davy Resource Group left the company, and we are waiting for a replacement at Davy Resource Group. Dr. David Hammer has recused himself from further consulting. The department's been working with another individual that it hopes will provide a proposal that we intend to have at City Council for the January 24th, 2022 meeting. So there is some movement forward, and the department is hopeful that by February of this year, we'll be in a position where we could have the consultants back on site. Thank you.
So that raises a number of issues. So I know that we approved a contract with the current engineer we've been using, but given the recusal, would the council not need to approve an agreement with anyone new? And is that where you're headed with that, I guess, is the question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's the reference January 24th, 2022 City Council meeting. I hope to have a description of the work by the gentleman, Todd Wagner, who's been working with the Watershed Erosion Task Force, and then also the cost of that proposal for consideration. Thank you.
And then what about the other person that you mentioned first, Berg? Is there a replacement forthcoming for that, or?
I'm going to let Mr. Brown answer that question. He's been working more closely with Davy Resource Group. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Mayor, sure. Actually, I checked this afternoon with our contact with Davey, Jacob McMahon's, and they are in the process of hiring a replacement for Andy. He told me they have 2 individuals thus far that they are interviewing, and hopefully we'll be making a decision here in the next 4 to 6 weeks, I would say.
Well, I mean, with all due respect to them, I guess I'm a little concerned that we're sort of letting our timeline be bound by their hiring process. And those things they can take on a life of their own and take some time. So do we have a backup plan that we can go to if the council would want to do that?
I was going to suggest that Joe and I discuss options, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay. Jacob McMahon's with Davey. I would expect that he would certainly be a resource and be able to help us out, but I can't commit that he can do that. But we can certainly check into that.
Okay, so could we have an understanding then, without objection by any member of the council, that at the next council meeting that you and Joe come back with firm recommendations as to replacements as needed to move forward with the items that the council had questions about, so we can up or down go forward with the project or not? Is that okay with everyone? Any objection? Okay, are you good with that, Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir.
And Benich, are you okay with that, City Administrator Cross? Okay, all right, thank you. Anything else under information before we go to action? All right, under action, the first item is the Lawn and Garden Summit 2022 proposal from Councilmember Edens. Ms. Edens, would you like to speak to this?
Sure, we were just kind of going to give you an update and put it back in front of the council. So I know we have a lot of new council members. This was an event that we were planned in the fall and winter of 2019 that got canceled in 2020. Things hadn't really improved enough in the spring of 2021 to reschedule it, and so here we are for a third try. And so I would like to say first that if rates don't improve, or if public health guidelines would change, or there would be a capacity limit like there was that we experienced in 2020, obviously the event would be canceled, and there's other things that we can change about the event as well, in terms of spreading booths out, social distancing, or potentially moving the lectures outside as well. So the majority of the event right now is outside. The first question that's usually asked is, well, why don't we just change the date and put it later in the summer? And the answer is we can't. We're using this weekend based on the business availability. So this is an economic development event where we are featuring our wonderful lawn and garden businesses in addition to originally what was 18 other partner organizations. And so those businesses are on a fall and spring planting schedule. And so simply it was this weekend or nothing was the option. And then in the past, when we have tried to look into the fall, it really wasn't an option as well. So I did want to go ahead and put that out there before anybody asked. And so it is within the budget. It is already on the calendar. And last time in 2020, the total Julian put out, which was on an attachment on October 28th of 2020, was it was expected to only cost $1,200 plus police time. There might be some changes if we would need to put out antibacterial or look at renting additional booths, but we're not talking about an exorbitant event. We are talking about a budgeted event. And so just so you guys know where I'm at, since it's been a while since economic development has had a committee, the first step was establishing what date worked for the businesses. We've done that in the fall. The second step is what we're in right now, which is making sure that that date, definitely works for our partner organizations and people don't want to back out. And so far I've had a really good response. I haven't had anybody say, no, I don't want to do it. I've had, one organization say, we are really excited if COVID gets worse, we're out. But that's kind of where we're at. And so I thought it was for information, but since it's for action, I guess I'd like to make the motion to go ahead and proceed. And Hope things turn around and we'll be able to have a successful event.
Okay, so Councilor Eden, just a couple of questions. Number one, specifically the date, and number two, budgetary implication.
Yep, it's the 19th. So the estimate before came in at $1,200. Where I'm getting that from is from a memo from October 28th and 2020 that included outdoor tent and setup, printed materials, advertising, and food and drinks for the volunteers. Where that would change is if we need to rent additional tents for spacing, or if we wanted to provide like a minimum sales guarantee for a food truck, that would be an additional cost. But I don't expect it to exceed the $4,000 event budget in economic development.
So $4,000, correct?
Is the total event budget. No, what I'm saying was previously budgeted was 1,200, unless we have a meeting with staff where it's changed. I don't expect it to go past the cap.
Which is 4,000, right?
Total events, period. That's all economic development has for any budget.
Oh,
But
okay,
that is it. But it is in there, yes.
So for this event, I guess you're saying about roughly 1,000 to 1,500. Is that what I heard you say?
I would think it would be around 1,500 if nothing else is changed. If we change things, I think it could be around 3,000. And I guess what I'm asking for is permission to proceed, so we can go ahead and have those staff meetings and decide, do we need to rent anything additional to spread people out? That kind of thing.
Okay, so to get it on the floor for
But
discussions.
it is budgeted, and it does fit. The other thing as well is it is on the calendar, and for everybody that's new, this had been approved before in committee. It had been approved before at council. The problem is it keeps getting canceled and rescheduled. But it does fit in with one of our goals, if you're wondering. It fits under the continue efforts to host new special event programming in collaboration with the Wildwood business community. Line number 81 on strategic goals.
Okay, thank you. So to get this on the floor, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. City Administrator Cross, I think I saw your hand. Did you want to speak to this at all? Or was I mistaken?
Mr. Mayor, I did not raise my hand. However, since you've given me the opportunity to speak, I would like just to clarify, the total event budget for the Economic Development Committee is $4,000, as Councilmember Edens pointed out, for the entire year of 2022. This event, although was estimated at some $1,200 several years ago, if the council chooses to go forward with this, I would ask that a cap be put on it. We just came off of an event that was supposed to be a rather small expenditure for the city, and that was the tree lighting ceremony. That should have been a couple $100, ended up costing the city $9,000 and 90 staff hours. So I'm smarting a little bit right now about that event. So I would certainly want to cap this to make sure that we don't have budget overruns in a similar manner. So I would ask that if the council goes forward, that they put a cap on it at the $1,200 or $1,500 and no more, to ensure that we don't get into a cost overrun situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any objection to Councilor Edens? Do you object to a cap?
I just wanted to add as well that I think we shared Mr. Cross's frustration, but that how do I put this? One of the deciding factors that helped it go over budget is not involved with this organization whatsoever. And so I don't anticipate the same level of problems or staff hour.
Okay, so are you okay with a $1,500 cap if the rest of the council is?
1,500, not without talking to Steve or Joe first and determining if we need an extra tent. That's maybe $500 to space people out.
Okay, so
I say that because this was done 2 years ago, and if there's a little bit of inflation, and even
So is this something that could wait till the next council meeting so you can have an opportunity to hash all that with the city team?
I'm okay with that as long as the council's okay with us, planning and advertising and moving on. I just don't know if the second tent costs $200 or $500.
I don't think
And
we
I
want to
just-
advertise it. I don't think we want to advertise anything until it's done.
Okay, so that'd be a question for Steve and Joe, how long that we have before we need to put this out there to the public.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So question for Councilmember Edens. I have the date for this event, proposed date for this event down as the 19th, but if you would confirm for me one more time the month, I would appreciate it.
March.
March, thank you.
Councilmember Dodwell.
First off, I want to say that we have a great deal of enthusiasm from our vendors. We have a great deal of enthusiasm from our vendors that we're going to participate in this and are hoping to be able to participate in this. For those of you that are new to council, the goal was to be able to have this in the spring, early spring, so that we could, number one, have little mini seminars for our residents on different ways to handle gardening, yard maintenance, et cetera. We've had a great number of residents move into the city of Wildwood in the last couple of years. And so we wanted to be able to give them that opportunity. Number two, it's a way for these vendors to be able to voluntarily participate and talk about their businesses. I don't think we do enough to support ways to get, well, we do enough, or we do a lot in many of our different events, but we were trying to tie this directly to encouraging individuals to make it green in Wildwood as much as possible. The second option that we were also moving in the direction to implement was obtaining volunteers to participate in setup and takedown. I think that's something that in 2022, we should be engaging our community to do some of the setup on this stuff and not just our tight staff to be able to set up tents, et cetera. I think we have a lot of individuals who have requested volunteer hours, et cetera. And so I don't see us having a problem with volunteers to help set up what we want to try to accomplish doing. We had many of the vendors when we were talking back in 2020 willing to come in early or the day before, help set up tents, get the tables set up so that they could get prepared to have their items and information about different yard improvements, tree restoration, soil improvements, things of that sort. So it was our goal definitely to include residents and or members of the businesses that are going to have the opportunity to represent themselves at this event. And I really think that we need to start utilizing those kinds of individuals instead of having the same crew of 5 to 10 staff members setting up tents and putting tables out, et cetera. I know they can do it really quickly because they've done it so much, but we've got a lot of residents that want to be able to participate in that route. So as we get closer to this, I know Lauren was going to be sending out volunteer requests to many of the vendors.
Thank
So
you.
that's why I'm seconding the motion.
Thank you. Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah, I have a few questions. One, Steve, you said that our last event cost $9,000. Where in the budget did that come from?
At this point, I'm not sure. As Ms. Edens pointed out, the event, the tree lighting ceremony was to be a WBA, a Wildwood Business Association event with a small amount of assistance from the city. And it turned out that we did the entire event because WBA was unable to fulfill their obligations. That money will end up coming out of Mr. Vunich's event budget. And hopefully he has some reserve in there for that, but that's where it would come from.
And so why would it not be coming out of the economic development budget?
Well, first of all, there's not enough money in the economic development department's budget. The total budget for 2022 is $4,000. So it could come out of there, but we would need to go to council at mid-year for a mid-year budget adjustment to accommodate those additional expenditures.
And then the $1,500, does that include policing and trash and the wash stands? Or is that going to be an additional cost?
Those would be additional costs. I saw an email from Councilmember Edens today identifying the line items that made up the approximate $1,200 from the budget that was put together back in 2019. And there were only about 3 or 4 line items, which did not include police services, wash stands, minimums guarantee for food trucks, that sort of thing. So that's why I was asking for potential putting a cap on these expenditures, because I could see that there were a number of items missing that potentially could run that cost up from $1,200 to something greater than that.
So if we have a cap for $1,500, $1,200, what is the additional cost going to be for the policing, the trash and the wash stands? Are you expecting that to come out of the $1,500?
It would come out of the economic department budget. And I think Mayor Boland asked that Councilmember Edens, Joe Vunich, and myself sit down and really go through the budget to determine what that total amount might be, and then come back to council at the next meeting to really talk about what that budget potentially could be. It could be $2,000. It could be more. Again, I just saw that email just today.
Okay, thank you.
But I believe that the $1,200 that's identified in that budget is not enough to cover this event.
Do you have an idea what the top cost would be?
Not until I have a chance to sit down with Ms. Edens and Mr. Vunich.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Cross, you had asked to speak earlier after Councilmember Cutchin. Did you get everything said there? Or do you have something further you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have something I wanted to add, a couple things. We need to be cognizant, we as a city, with regards to the timing of this event being in March. Right now, the current variant of COVID is extremely transmissible. And we need as a city to be responsible in terms of protecting the residents, protecting our vendors, protecting our city staff and our council members. So, but Ms. Edens has in her emails to all the vendors indicated that this could be canceled. So we're just gonna have to watch and kind of see where this goes. If nothing changes significantly for the better, we would not be able to open up City Hall to any of the vendors or to any of the residents to use restrooms or anything else. So this would have to be an entirely outdoor event, which does change the nature of it. There are many good reasons for having this event in terms of engaging the businesses in the city of Wildwood. So as Ms. Dodwell was pointing out, it's a good event, but we have to do it right from a cost perspective as well as protecting the residents. Ms. Dodwell also brought up, and I did want to point this out with regards to having volunteers help put up tents and so forth. And I do want to point out that we've had numerous conversations with the city attorney and the director of planning and myself with regards to liability issues. And those tents are heavy. Those tents are big. They are 50-pound sandbags and so forth. And quite honestly, although it's a great idea to have volunteers help, if they're injured, the city has a liability issue. So we have to be very, very careful if we can do it at all. And if the city attorney says we can do it, then we have to get waivers and so forth to avoid any liability. But we've had those discussions in the past. I would need to circle back with the city attorney to find out if that's possible.
So it sounds to me like a motion to postpone would be in order for the next meeting. Does anyone want to make that motion? Councilmember McCutcheon makes a motion to postpone to the next city council meeting that would give Councilmember Edens time.
Can I clarify? Are we postponing the final? What is being postponed? Me not sending out emails? Me not meeting with staff?
No,
Define the
postponing.
postponement.
postponing to allow for you and whomever else may want to join in to meet with our city team, Joe Vinich and Steve Cross in particular, relative to working out the mechanics and the costs before we send out invitations and so forth, with report back to the next council meeting. Are you okay with that, Councilmember Edens?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we just leave the public with enough time to get advertising and things like that out there.
So-
I think
so
by
they've
by the end of January, that should be fine. We can still get materials printed. That's plenty of time. We'll know a little bit more about COVID. And Mr. Cross said this, but I did want to stress this again because I know Deb asked this question, but the reason why bathrooms, portable water closets, all of that was not listed as an original line item is because City Hall was open and we were having folks use the public restrooms there, and so that would be a different cost that we would have to add. So having that meeting is really important for us to be able to have a final answer. But I just want to leave you with this. Economic development should be able to have some successful events, and this has it's not only great for the partner organizations that were originally planning on showing up. We originally had the St. Louis Science Center, the Audubon Group, MDNR, the list Goats on the Go, beekeeping, but it was also serving an educational purpose. So watershed erosion was going to have a stream table, do demonstrations, talk to people about issues in our community. So just in defense of a program that's still going to have a relatively small.
So
budget
Councilor Edens,
cost.
we're just on postponement, Got to keep it tame for that. So thank you for all the information though. So it sounds like you're okay with postponement. Is that correct?
Yeah, as long as we keep because I really hate saying I don't know, and I can't have an answer till we all get together and we see what COVID's going to do.
Okay. So we have a motion to postpone. Is there a second to the motion to postpone made by Councilmember Clark? Any discussion on the motion to postpone? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to postpone this item to the next council meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us to our next item under action. We have an executive session scheduled. However, as you can see, we have several council members that are participating by Zoom tonight and would not be able to participate in the executive session. And as is the case with our executive session, it has an important impact for our city. And so as an important matter, my suggestion would be that we postpone the executive session to the first meeting in February. And if you're in agreement with that, if someone would like to make that motion, made by Councilmember Brost, seconded by Councilmember Bartoni. Any discussion on the motion to postpone to the first meeting in February? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to postpone the executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that carries. Now, we are done with action items, but as you may have noted, we include on the work session agenda under information a catch-all for our council meeting agenda items. It's under item F. So we've got about 20 minutes left, give or take. And what I thought we would do without objection is to utilize that and go into some of the items on the main agenda and do some of that discussion here, which is completely permissible, so we can expedite the meeting of the council. Is there any objection to that? Councilmember Edens.
I had a topic that I wanted to bring up in work session that we talked about.
We
but it's not
did.
related to the main agenda. Is that okay if I do that?
That's
real
going to
quick?
be under miscellaneous.
I thought that's what we were in now.
We are not in that yet. Not
We're
yet.
Not in that yet. Okay.
Not yet. Almost.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome. That's all right. So, so I don't think I saw objection to moving forward. All right. So what I thought I would do, let's kind of do this in reverse order, if you don't mind, since I see a gentleman here who is involved in Bill 2666. So Bill 2666 relates to the recommendation from the Administration Public Works Committee relating to the retention of a political consultant. Councilmember Garitano is chair of that committee. I want to make sure you're on here. Okay, good. So we do have with us in the audience this evening the candidate who was recommended by the Admin Public Works Committee, Mr. Jake Silverman. Joe Garitano, as chair of that committee, would you like to give the council and the public some background on the process and how this all came about and so forth?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Administration and Public Works Committee brings forth the recommendation of Mr. Jake Silverman for this political consultant role. And as you might recall, we've identified a need here in the city that there is ARPA federal money that is being given to the state. And we have unique needs here in Wildwood, unique to Wildwood from other cities, where we would like to pursue some of these funds that the state will be deciding on in their session, which just started last week and will run through May. So the idea of a political consultant was raised as someone who could advocate on behalf of the city of Wildwood. Now, the ideas or needs that have been identified are erosion control. As you know, the Watershed Erosion Task Force has been working and has identified that there are projects and therefore funds that are necessary in order to complete these projects. Internet was also another item that was identified. And so therefore, in order for the city to pursue advocacy at Jefferson City, the idea of the political consultant was brought forth. So there was an RFP that was provided to several of these vendors or providers that do this kind of service. And so we did have several responses. Ultimately, it did come down where we met with two of them to better understand what kind of service they provided. Mr. Silverman comes as the recommendation from the Admin and Public Works Committee. Some of the items that were brought up that make Mr. Silverman stand out as a candidate are that he would be considering Wildwood his top priority to work on behalf of the city. He also has a vested interest, his family and himself from Wildwood. And so therefore he is familiar with some of the issues that have been raised here in Wildwood and therefore has some good background. He also spoke about the relationships that he has with the legislators at Jefferson City. And therefore that would be a great help for us here in advocating for money for these projects that will benefit our residents here of Wildwood. So that concludes my summary update. Certainly open to see if you have any questions. Also, the members of the committee are also familiar with Mr. Silverman, who attended one of our committee meetings, and we did have discussion at the last two meetings regarding him.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Garitano. Does any member of the council have any questions for Councilmember Garitano? Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yeah. Joe, I wasn't quite clear. Did we issue an RFP?
Yes, that is correct. I'll let Mr. Cross maybe provide additional information around that. That was handled by his office.
Okay, thank you.
City Administrator Cross?
Thank you. Councilmember McCutcheon, yes, we did issue an RFP. We issued it to 6 separate firms, 3 of which responded, 1 responded and declined due to other commitments, and 2 others did not respond at all.
And then we did interviews. Okay, and any other questions for Councilmember Garitano or Councilmember Bartoni?
Thank you. So a few of us will remember that, I guess it was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, we actually had a consultant at that time also. And then the city, made the decision not to renew that contract. And I think one of the reasons was we really didn't know what the consultant was doing, if we were really getting a, bang for our buck, so to speak. So what was the thought process or the conversation with this gentleman is he going to report back to us at a regular intervals? Like, how are we going to know what he's doing for us?
That would be part of the contract, but I'm going to defer to Mr. Silverman here in a moment to answer that without objection from the council. And before Councilmember Dodwell speaks, I just want to mention when the council at the time, which was obviously composed of different people, made the decision to end the relationship with the former consultant, my impression was that there were a lot of issues underlying that particular decision, more than because they didn't like some reporting thing. I think there were several other issues going on, but Councilmember Dodwell.
I just wanted to make sure that we have our candidate have the opportunity to speak for a few minutes to the council as a whole.
We're going to do that without objection here in just a second. Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, and to Don's point, I think the contract, if you read that, it has provided Olympus, i.e. Jake, will provide an item E or F, provide weekly legislative updates and host weekly legislative calls, which was something we did not have before, was some sort of continuous contact with our lobbyist in Jeff City. So glad to see that. And maybe Don, that maybe answer your questions about the communication between the lobbyists and us.
I think everyone agrees we need to have frequent reporting and input from the council. So with that, Mr. Silverman, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. If you want to come to the podium and say just a few words, and then we'll see if we have any questions for you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. Can you hear me? Yep. I appreciate this opportunity. As it was mentioned, I am from the city of Wildwood, so this does mean a lot to me. To the question that was asked, yes, I will be providing a weekly report of all legislative matters that pertain to the city of Wildwood. On top of that, I do host weekly calls with all of my clients, and I'd actually ask the city to allow me to come by once a month to actually have a face-to-face conversation, just so I can answer any questions or any concerns that you might have. So if that answers the question from the councilman, that's how I do most of my things with all my clients.
And for clarification, thank you for the offer on the once a month meetings here, and would do that in work session, I guess. Are you proposing to do that throughout the entire year, or just when the legislature is in session?
I mean, I don't mind doing it throughout the year. Obviously, session only goes till mid-May. So, I can update you on other matters, but usually it's most helpful from January to May.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Silverman? Councilmember Dodwell.
Why don't you give the whole council your background a little bit?
Sure. So I have been in politics since 2009. And in 2017, I got my start with the Missouri Roofers Association as their executive director. From there, I started my own company, which was a campaign consulting firm, eventually hoping to take it into move it into a lobbying firm as well. In 2019, I lobbied for a different firm where I was a contract lobbyist. I lobbied anywhere from energy issues, education, local governments. I represented 3 or 4 local governments. So, I have a wide range of experience. In 2020, I decided to take my company and move it over to a lobbying, bring in lobbying into my company. And I've been fortunate enough to work with some energy companies as well, some education groups, and some manufacturing groups as well. So it's been great. Wildwood would be a fantastic client, obviously, as somebody that grew up here. But that's where I got my start. So I've been in the industry for a long time.
And I think you have a law degree, is that correct?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Dodwell.
Can you describe the difference between a political strategist, sorry, I can't even say it right, and a lobbyist? Because I think Councilmember Garantano kept saying political strategist, and we're not looking at this as a political role. And from my perspective, we're looking at it, I believe, more as a voice for the city of Wildwood and Jeff City. So why don't you describe the two differences?
Absolutely. And I like the word legislative consultant. Sometimes lobbyist gets a negative connotation. But a political consultant typically works with campaigns. I have done campaigns in the past, but a legislative consultant really focuses on the advocacy of their client in Jeff City. Whether it's the bill process, whether it's the budget process, just making sure that a client is represented at all stakes of, at all sets or points of the legislative process, whether that's the proposal of a bill, creating a bill, committee, subcommittees, on the floor, or even to the signing by the governor. So.
Councilor Nyan.
I think I know the answer to this, but I just wanted everyone to hear it or to make sure that I'm correct. I believe you mentioned in a previous meeting that you do live in Jeff City now. You keep talking about being a Wildwood resident, but you currently do live in Jeff City, so would be right there, correct?
Yes, I live in Jeff City during session. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Fleischer.
I'm like the guy that's anti-lobbyist here. Okay. But I've met you before, I think. I don't remember where. You're charming. I think you're great.
Thank you very much.
Having said all that,
tell my wife
that. I feel like our job is to advocate for the city of Wildwood. Why do you think that? Educate me. Why would this be a better route for us in your opinion, I guess?
Well, and you all do great jobs at advocating for the city, but one of the greatest things about having a legislative consultant or a lobbyist for that matter, is the fact that we're there 24/7. I have worked on the Senate floor till 1:30, 2 in the morning, making sure that my clients at the time were represented. So, unfortunately, I don't think you want to stay in Jeff City, till 2 in the morning. But that is what I do. So, and the connections are very important as well. So, just because one legislator and they say that they're going to do something for you does not necessarily mean that throughout the process is going to be, done. So, there's a lot of different personalities in the Capitol. And so my job is to kind of make sure that those personalities are set properly to make sure that the city of Wildwood is advocated for properly.
And if I could just expand on that excellent question and your response. I don't view the role of us and his role as mutually exclusive. I think that they actually should, when working properly, dovetail with each other. I'll give you an example, or say one thing and then give you an example. And with all due respect to Mr. Silverman or anyone else that we might retain, there are several instances where there is simply no better option than having one of us there at a meeting or testifying. And then to the example that I think would demonstrate the dovetailing of our consultant with us in the city is being made aware of not only the bill that's being proposed, but hearing opportunities, who is manning that hearing, who's chairing that hearing, who should testify among us and who should testify first, who should testify second, and so on and so forth. So I look at it as more of a team approach between the city and us as elected officials and the individual we have with, sort of boots on the ground intelligence in Jefferson City versus they just do everything and we do nothing. I think it is. Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, to me, we're paying somebody to advocate for us when we should be advocating for ourselves anyway,
or
in my opinion.
Or both.
But he does make, you have the connections that maybe we don't have and things like that. I can't get over the whole thing. I'm sorry.
No problem.
No worries. Thanks for the question. Councilmember Garetano.
Sure, thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Dodwell. I meant to say legislative consultant. Apologize for saying that, and hopefully my description aligned with the legislative consultant. So I think a good question that Mr. Silverman answered for the committee that would be helpful for the council to hear is that, obviously the session in Jeff City just started last week, and the session will run through May. So on my mind is that we have to hit the ground running in order to get in front of these legislators and make them aware of our needs here in Wildwood, because time is running short. And so what are some of those initial steps that you described to the Admin Public Works Committee that I thought would be helpful for council to hear of things that you would do right from the start, assuming you would be in this role?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things would be to, there's been pre-filing of legislation. There's already been legislation that's filed since day one of session, providing a list of every bill that could potentially affect the city of Wildwood. Unfortunately, there's a lot of, if you're not at the table, sometimes, things can slip by, and it's not necessarily great legislation for you. For the city. So one of the most important things is providing that list to you. On top of that, I know watershed erosion. I've watched the task force. Capital improvements, or things that need capital, is something that was mentioned several times. Going to Representative Cody Smith, the head of budget on the House side, and talking to him about the issues, and bringing some council members as well to kind of describe what's going on, what we need. And then also talking to the subcommittee members of the budget as well to, explain and kind of move that through the process. It's very important. As the mayor has said, working hand in hand is extremely important. And I look forward to doing that. So.
Thank you very much for that. And as you said, right, we need to be at the table, because as I've heard the expression, if you're not at the table, you become the meal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Garitano. Councilmember Galani.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for anybody who doesn't care for lobbyists, or to your point, Councilmember Flasher, I would just advocate and say that there's a reason there are lobbyists, and it's because it works. And so I would advocate that not having a legislative consultant actually puts us at a competitive disadvantage to our counterparts who are seeking to achieve the same funding and resources that we are. So in my opinion, it's a no-brainer.
Thank you. Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes, I would just have to tag on to what Councilmember Galani said. I think Mr. Silverman's Rolodex is probably more extensive than the Rolodex that any of us has regarding contacts down in Jefferson City. And putting that Rolodex to work for us, I think, could be pretty impactful for the city.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark.
Well, you told us what you would do for Wildwood, but I guess I'm looking for, what have you done? What successes can you tell us some things that has been done? Because I like to measure everything, and just thinking about, how do you measure your success? How do you measure that you have been successful in the job that you've done in the past, or what you're going to do for Wildwood? A sort of score sheet. Do you have something like that to show us that we were here and now we're here?
Well, I mean, when, if I'm lucky enough to work with the city of Wildwood, obviously you get to see what bills have passed that are pertinent to the city. Like you said, or like we talked about the watershed erosion, you would, see it in the budget, in the state budget. But I've had a lot of successes. I've been fortunate enough to, in the past, work with the Maryville University to help make sure that students were able to basically work in the state of Missouri. They weren't, when they took their tests, they weren't going to be qualified to work in the state of Missouri because they were a pre-master's program, pre-accredited master's program. I was fortunate enough to help with passing a bill, or lobbying on passing a bill that helped basically change that law to where we were actually able to get these students, accredited essentially. So yeah, I've had a lot of successes. I've worked with telehealth and in the healthcare industry. I've done some tracking with local governments. So I've had a lot of successes. I don't know, I can't give you a scorecard right now, but you would be able to see it at the end of the session. So.
Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, do you represent any clients that would have a conflict with the city?
No, none at all. And that, as a matter of fact, actually, I will, if I'm fortunate enough, I will not take on any other municipality.
Okay, thank you.
And that was actually something that was brought up during the subcommittee process that I participated in, and that I believe he reiterated at the admin PW meeting, if I'm correct. So it's kind of an important thing for us. So, all right. Any other questions for Mr. Silverman? Would you mind staying with us through the duration of the council meeting since the bill, in case anyone has anything further? Would you be okay with that?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're getting on next to 7 o'clock. I've got one thing I want to mention, update the council on, and Councilmember Edens, we're now going to go into miscellaneous. Do you want to raise your issue now, or do you want me to just put it on the agenda? Which would be your preference?
We can go ahead and put it on the maybe agenda, let's say 2 times from now.
Hey, do you want to let the council know?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and let the council
Councilor Edens and I just Councilor Edens and I discussed an item she wanted on the agenda for the next meeting. So Councilor Edens, you want to give a brief description of that for everyone?
Yes, I will be sending the council just a really good resource from NPR that I found, and it was on the importance of local governments reassessing the risk of fires in the area. So not only from the forest management standpoint, and again, I remember we do own our own parks, we own our own trails where there's dense tree stands, but also from building code permits as well. So areas that maybe cities have not thought about restricting building in should be that maybe trees cannot be within X distance of a house even, changing building materials, no cedar shingles, things like that we could have discussions with as a community. We may find that we need to look at controlled burns, but basically the risk for these types of fires is increasing in areas that we don't typically think of. So when I hear forest fires, right, I think of out west, I think of Washington, I think of cedar trees and great redwood trees, and I don't think of what sometimes feels like a swamp and very humid Missouri in the summer as a heavy risk for forest fires. But that's a mental reassessment that I need to do. So I was hoping to have it on a future agenda so we could talk about it at a council level before it would ever be sent to a subcommittee, and have a attachment that is prepared with experts' opinions included. So empowering staff in the meantime to have discussions with MDNR, with forestry services, with our fire districts about things that we need to look at doing in the future. I went on a walk on our lovely trail that we own, the Turkey Hollow Trail, and I spent the entire time wondering what the area would look like covered in a forest fire. What would happen to our infrastructure on 109? So I just want to start that discussion, and maybe we can be a bellwether and do something innovative in the state for a best practice.
Okay, so without objection, that'll be on the agenda for the next council work session for a discussion about forest fires in Wildwood. Thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it. Before we end under miscellaneous, I just want to mention one thing that came to my attention today, and this concerns the proposed site of the Monarch Fire District, which, as you know, is on the south side of Wild Horse Creek Road. So just a little bit of history, and this is just to update you. We will inevitably have more discussions, hopefully good ones, about this. But basically, in a nutshell, over the last several weeks, subsequent to the CUP process that they agreed to participate in, there have been a few instances where we've had to step in because of violations that were occurring, such as removing trees without permission and so on and so forth. Those were remedied. And then today I learned just late this afternoon that the fire district, Monarch, has said they're going to sue the city because they want to put their fire station in immediately and don't want to deal with the process. While I greatly respect every single first responder, including everyone in that department, I found that to be extremely disappointing and frankly inconsistent with working together as neighbors. So from my perspective, I think we've simply been doing our job, which we should continue to do for our residents. And in that regard, I've asked our city attorney without objection to reach out to Monarch tomorrow to see if we can find some common ground so that we don't go down that road. And my hope is that we can find a resolution that allows everyone to win in this process. But at the end of the day, we certainly have to do what we were elected to do, and that is to look after our residents. So with that, are there any questions in that course of action? All right, seeing none, I would entertain, unless anyone else has anything under miscellaneous, a motion to adjourn, and we'll take a brief 3-minute break and come back and convene the main meeting of the council. Anything else? Otherwise, motion to adjourn made by Councilmember Farmer. Thank you. Seconded by Councilmember Nyan. Motion to adjourn is non-debatable. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the work session is adjourned. As I said, we'll take just a few minutes to break. If we could please come back in about 3 minutes to start the meeting, since we have a lot of people with us this evening, I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, council members, if everyone could take their seats, we're going to move forward with the meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, January 10, 2022. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bullen,
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
Here.
Councilmember Hopper,
Here.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Brost,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And again, welcome, and particularly welcome to everyone who's with us in the audience this evening. Appreciate you being here, and Happy New Year to everyone. For those who are comfortably able, if you'd please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is minutes from the December 13, 2021 work session and regular meeting of the council. If anyone has any comments or questions about those, now would be the time to talk about it. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Councilmember Clark.
I will make that motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councilmember Farmer. Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes as presented? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving next to public participation, I just want to mention a couple of things about that before we begin. Public comment is a valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must indicate they would like to do that by presenting the city clerk with a speaker card. She's seated to your left, or using the raise hand feature on Zoom. When your name is called, please state your name and ward. To ensure that all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation, and I will let you know when that time limit is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it. And at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting, and we may also post the responses on the City Council page of our website. Finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. This means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited, and I want to thank everyone in advance for following these. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Andy Irvine, wishing to comment about code ordinance violations, 542 Etherton Road.
In thinking this through, there's no way I can state all that needs to be said about this situation ad-libbing in 5 minutes, so I will read from my notes. I have my timer set. My purpose for speaking tonight is to bring awareness to all regarding a situation that has been ongoing for 3.5 years in the historic area of Orville. The property owners at 542 Etherton Road are operating their businesses in a non-urban residential only zone neighborhood, violating the simplified conditional use permit as built status of their barn. The document I sent to all this afternoon explains some of the frustration we're experiencing with city government, all being all of you members. There are several emails from code enforcement and Joe Vunich stating the property owner has been notified no businesses can be run. All ward reps since 2018 are aware of the same. Early on, the property owner admitted he was operating his businesses openly and needed some time to wind things down. After some time passed, there was no winding down. Subsequently, the property owner even stated to West News Magazine it is his right to operate his businesses here, and code enforcement has been advising him on how to be compliant. The prosecuting attorney has told me they will not prosecute a case they don't feel they can win, this even though the property owner admits guilt. The prosecuting attorney also told my attorney they will not prosecute business operation or enforce the simplified conditional use permit as built violations. Prosecuting attorney told Joe Vunich they would not prosecute the business operation. Subsequently, thanks to Joe's effort, 3 misdemeanor charges were brought. The property owner pleaded guilty to all 3 misdemeanors in June. They were given 90 days to comply. I met Joe and Steve Cross in front of the property 97 days after the plea. I pointed out there was no compliance. Not one pebble of gravel had been removed. The grand trees replaced had not met required specs, and the 2 sheds on the back of the barn were still in place. I pointed out that the green space at the front of the barn had not been restored per the second set of plans approved by the city, which were not approved by the residents of Orville. I was told the city was working with the property owner in order to obtain a no-rise certification for the sheds that are a violation of the simplified conditional use permit as built status of the barn. I also inquired as to when the police assistance with a property owner to obtain proper registration for a cited nuisance vehicle would take place. Originally, the nuisance vehicle violation was cited by Joe. Subsequently, the issue was turned over to the police. Steve said he thought enough time had gone by and he would contact the chief. Our concern here is the potential for additional vehicles to be staged. There are already 4 business trucks, 3 to 4 business trailers, 3 to 4 privately owned vehicles. And on December 14th, 75 days after speaking with Steve and Joe, and still no remediation or compliance, I contacted the court clerk. I was told the city has found the property owner to be compliant for the grand tree and imported gravel and was working with them for a no-rise certification. For several months, I have not received requested responses from my ward reps, Joe and Steve. This is not only unprofessional conduct, it is inconsiderate and disrespectful. On December 14th, I made a formal complaint after asking Joe to address it on December 10th. My complaint was that the property owner had used a commercial tractor to move an old rusty swing set with a bent frame from back of the property to the front of the property, 15 feet from Etherton Road, up against my fence where no one could possibly swing on it. The swing set was placed in their front yard to provoke 2 years ago, and the city made the property owner move it. I am now making the same request for action. Joe? The property owner has erected a sliding gate between the house and the barn in order to obscure the view of business vehicles and operations. They have also placed a large tarp over the 2 sheds in an attempt to disguise them, and still commercial equipment, old appliances, and other items are visible. Both of these actions were done immediately following my communications with the city. If someone from the city is telling the property owner to make these maneuvers, who is it? I have filed sunshine requests for any emails, phone records, or letters sent from the city to the property owner since their guilty plea in June 2021. The city's response was, there are no records pursuant to your request. So how are they communicating? I believe that as a property owner and a resident of Wildwood, I have the right to expect requested responses from my ward reps and city employees. It is also my right to expect the city to enforce its codes and ordinances meant to protect property owners, and that is not currently happening. I request to meet with you, Jim, for the purpose of understanding what support and actions I can expect from the city. There's a part of the response where I asked for a response. As you know, Jim, today I copied you and Steve and Joe on an email I sent to Rick Brown regarding this no-rise certification question. And that needs to be addressed as well. So it looks like I've got 18 seconds left and I'll yield to you on that.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
I don't have any more speaker cards.
Okay, thank you. Travis, do we have anyone from? What? Okay, thank you. All right, thanks again, Mr. Irvine, for coming for public participation. Moving next into mayor announcements and appointments. The first one is a remembrance of first responders. And as you can see, we have several of those with us this evening. So to give credit where credit's due, this came from a Wildwood resident who brought to my attention shortly after the holidays that there had been a first responder in Columbia, Boone County Assistant Fire Chief Bryant Gladney, who had been killed. And that is always tragic when that occurs, and certainly over the holidays. And as I thought about it, it occurred to me that we've had other first responders in our community who unfortunately suffered the same fate. Those being St. Louis County Police Detective Antonio Valentine, and the other being Wayne County, Illinois Deputy Sheriff Sean Riley. And again, these all occurred in and around the holidays. And I know that all of you share my great appreciation and admiration for all of our first responders. One of the things, speaking personally, that occurs to me when I hear of something like this is the fact that we, as not being a first responder, are not called upon as they are every single day to address situations that are unexpected. They don't know what awaits them. It could be their life, and their judgment is always looked at. And that's a pretty high bar. So with that in mind, I want to thank all of our guests who are with us this evening in respect of these three individuals, noting in particular, St. Louis County Police Chief Gregory, thank you so much for being here. Eureka Fire Chief Brown, thank you for being here. And for every one of you that are wearing that uniform in behalf of all of us. So with that in mind, I would ask that we stand and have a brief moment of silence in remembrance of these three first responders. Thank you so much. And thanks again to all of you that are with us this evening for all that you do in our behalf. Next is recognition of our Scenes of the Season participants. I believe we have Miss Olson. Do I see Miss Olson with us? Abby, thank you for being here. Miss Gross, Issy Gross, is she here? Miss Sikowski. There you are. All right. So basically, the last event we had in terms of the season was made much better by the painting and decorating that was done by all of these individuals. And I just thought it would be appropriate for us to invite them here and say, thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for being part of our community. Okay, moving next into appointments. We have a couple. The first is a reappointment to the Wildwood Celebration Commission, Sharon Hudson from Ward 4. She has served admirably during the first term. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain that. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to approve the appointment of Ms. Hudson, made by Councilmember Dodwell, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve Ms. Hudson to the WCC, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next of the two appointments, we need a new city marshal because our existing marshal, who has done a terrific job, resigned. And I am very pleased to, speaking of first responders, to appoint Mr. Jeffrey Bader. He had a longstanding career with the St. Louis County Police. He's a Wildwood resident, Ward 3, and just a truly terrific individual. He's with us this evening. Mr. Bader, I see you on the back row. Raise your hand. Thank you for being here. So if anyone has any questions for him, I'm sure he'd be willing to answer those, or I can answer questions as well. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to approve Mr. Bader as our new city marshal. Made by Councilmember Nyan, seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Marshal Bader, thank you so much for being on our team. We appreciate it. All right, public hearings. We have one liquor license application for Alta Convenience 6524. Ms. Eldridge, would you please read that?
Liquor license application for Alta Convenience 6524, which is located at 2401 Highway 109.
Thank you. Mr. Benich, do you have anything you want to mention relative to this public hearing item?
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, there is a change in ownership associated with this convenience store that has a gas pumps and car wash. It also has liquor sales. The change in ownership does require the public hearing. Both the captain of the police department and the Department of Planning have authorized the liquor license per their code. Thank you.
Okay, and would you be looking for any action from the council this evening following the hearing?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the department would appreciate a motion, second, and vote to approve the liquor license.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Elders, do we have any speaker cards on this particular item?
We don't, but my understanding is that the applicant is available on Zoom if there's any questions.
Okay, in person or online?
On Zoom.
On Zoom. Okay, so we have the applicant on Zoom. If anyone has any questions, any other hands raised, Travis, on Zoom? All right. Any questions from any member of the council relative to this item? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion? Councilmember Galani.
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion to approve the liquor license.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the liquor license, seconded by Councilmember Garitano. Any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, and congratulations to the applicant, and glad you're part of our Wildwood community. Moving next into second readings. The first two bills, Bill 2656 and 2657, both relate to Ward 8, and they relate to both the consolidation and adjustment of lots to move the business of the council along. Would there be any objection to handling both of these collectively? All right, seeing none, Bill 2656 and Bill 2657 are before the council for final passage. They concern Ward 8. Is there a motion for the second reading of both bills? Made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Garitano. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2656 and 2657.
Bill 2656, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the consolidation of 3 legal lots of record into a single parcel of ground, such being lots 7, 8, and 9 of Grover Heights, Section 12, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, specifically situated on the southwest corner of the intersection of East Avenue and Manchester Road, to be hereafter known as Grover Heights Lot 7A, and thereby creating a 0.69 acre tract of land. Second reading. Bill 2657, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing by ordinance the adjustment of 4 legal lots of record into 2 parcels of ground, such being adjusted lots A, B, and C of the Boundary Adjustment Survey, Plat Book 274, page 63, and a tract of land being in Section 12, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, and more specifically being situated on the east side of Woods Avenue, south of Manchester Road, and to be hereafter known as Rogers Drive re-subdivision. Second reading.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything to add to the information that's been presented to the council on either of these bills?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, regarding the second item, the Rogers Drive re-subdivision, that is the location of the former Vinrock Kennels. Vinrock Kennels is closed, so again, I just thought I'd mention that. If there are any questions or comments, the department would be glad to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Vinich relative to Bill 2656 or Bill 2657? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bills 2656 and Bill 2657.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Brost.
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano.
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan.
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Both bills have passed and are now in effect. Moving next to Bill 2658, it's before the council also for final passage, and it concerns Ward 5. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember McCutcheon. Seconded by Councilmember Bertolino. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2658.
Bill 2658, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending chapter 390, traffic schedule 9, parking restrictions of the Code of Ordinances of the city of Wildwood by enacting new parking regulations on Dartmouth Crossing Drive and authorizing and directing the city traffic engineer to erect appropriate signage reflecting such parking regulations. Second reading.
Thank you. Rick Brown, Director of Public Works, do you have any additional information to provide to the council relative to Bill 2658?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I have nothing additional to add, but I'm available for any questions from the city council.
All right, thank you, Rick. Any questions for Mr. Brown? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2658.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Nian,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes.
All right, Bill 2658 has passed and is in effect. Moving next to Bill 2660, it's before the council for final passage and concerns the following wards 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Dodwell, seconded by Councilmember Hopper. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2660.
Bill 2660, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the United States Geological Survey, USGS, for a 2-year study of the Calks Creek watershed as part of the overall efforts of the city's Watershed Erosion Task Force, WETF, to develop environmentally appropriate and engineered solutions to ongoing concerns therein. Second reading.
Mr. Benish, do you have anything you want to mention relative to Bill 2660?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to extend my thanks to the mayor, you, and the city council for your patience regarding this particular item. It's been before you before, but I think we've got everything covered. At least that's what the USGS is telling the departments of public works and planning. So thank you. And if there are any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Joe or comments on the bill? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2660.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Nian,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Okay, the bill has passed. Thank you, and is in effect. Moving into first readings, Bill 2662 is before the council. It concerns Ward 1. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2662 for the first time.
Bill 2662, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city contractor agreement on behalf of the city with Spencer Contracting Company for the 2022 Community Development Block Grant ADA Curb Ramp Project. First reading.
Okay, thank you. Director of Public Works Brown, do you have any comments or anything you want to mention relative to Bill 2662?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't have anything additional to add, but again, I'm available for any questions from the city council.
Okay, any questions for Rick? Councilmember Dodwell.
Rick, do you have a map that you can put up so that the residents and the entire council knows exactly which areas you're talking about placing this in, because as I understood it from admin public works, it's a pretty specific area to get this work done.
Yes, Councilmember Dodwell, Travis is on it. The project will take place in Lafayette Trail subdivision. We've limited it pretty much just to that subdivision only for this grant period. So we'll address all the needs that are there this time.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions for Mr. Brown or any comments on the bill? I need my full screen back so I can see if there are any. There you go. All right, seeing none, the bill will be on the council's agenda for its next meeting. Moving next to Bill 2663. It is also before the council for the first reading and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Dodwell, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2663.
Bill 2663, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute a city consultant agreement on behalf of the city with JV Resource Group Incorporated for 2022 on-call arborist services. First reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown, again, do you have any comments or thoughts on Bill 2663?
Mr. Mayor, nothing additional. Again, I'm available for any questions from the city council.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Rick? Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, I was just curious, is this going to be the same person, the same arborist each time we need somebody, or will we get different people coming over?
Councilmember Clark, I think the expectation would be that we would have one individual assigned to the city to assist us with our needs for the year.
Any other questions for Rick or comments? All right, seeing none, the bill will be on the council's agenda for its next meeting. Similar to what the council did earlier, bills 2664 and 2665 relate to the adjustment of boundaries. The first one in Ward 1, the second in Ward, I'm sorry, first one in Ward 8, the second one in Ward 1. Would there be any objection to expedite the business of the council as to handling these collectively? All right, seeing none, I guess we need a vote. So they're before the council for first reading, Bill 2664 and 2665. They concern, as I mentioned, wards 8 and 1. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bills? Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Galani. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read bills 2664 and 2665 for the first time.
Bill 2664, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the adjustment of certain boundary lines between 4 lots that are known as tracts of land in the east 1/2 of the southwest quarter, 1/4 of the southwest quarter of Section 1, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, and adjusted Lot A of adjusted lots 2 and 3 of the Stricker-Vermont subdivision, Book 369, page 267, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, the said being located on the west side of Etherton Road, north of Manchester Road, which will thereby create more buildable areas for the 2 properties to be known hereafter as the boundary adjustment of 2545 and 2531 Etherton Road. First reading. Bill 2665, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, reauthorizing a boundary adjustment plat that will result in the consolidation of 4 lots of record, which are tracts of land in the west half of Section 7, Township 44 North, Range 3 East of the 5th Principal Meridian, such being more specifically located on the south side of Melrose Road, west of Austin Fort Road, and hereafter known as the lot consolidation plat in the west half of Section 7, first reading.
Thank you. Mr. Benich, is there anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2664 or 2665?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, Bill 2665 is a reapproval. The reapproval was necessary because A lien holder was out of state and it took an extensive period of time to have that signature added to the plat. So tonight, the department is respectfully requesting the consideration of a second reading. Other than that, the department's available for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Which bill was that, Joe? You wanted a second reading? 2665?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Joe on either of the bills before we get to that item? Councilmember Dodwell.
On 2664, Joe, these parcels are all being moved in together. Do we know what is planned for that particular tract?
Councilmember Dodwell.
Tract number 2.
Got to find my plat. So Ms. Dodwell, the vacant parcel of ground is owned by Mr. Busby, and it is his intent to build a new single-family dwelling there for his family. The other with the existing home will be retained, and that's owned by Mr. Stricker. And so we'll have an existing dwelling and then a new dwelling.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Joe or any comments? Relative to Bill 2665, does anyone want to make a motion for a second reading this evening? Made by Councilmember Garetano, Ward 8, seconded by Councilmember Galani. This will take a 2/3 supermajority vote to pass, since we'll be doing 2 readings at the same meeting. We'll try a voice vote first and see how that goes, if we need to do something different. Any discussion on the motion for second reading this evening? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion for second reading of Bill 2665, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 2/3 majority has been met. Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2665 a second time.
Bill 2665, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, reauthorizing a boundary adjustment plat that will result in the consolidation of 4 lots of record, which are tracts of land in the west half of Section 7, Township 44 North, Range 3 East of the 5th Principal Meridian, such being more specifically located on the south side of Melrose Road, west of Austinport Road, and hereafter known as the lot consolidation plat in the west half of Section 7, second reading.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from any member of the council relative to Bill 2665? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2665.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garetano,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Yes.
Bill 2665 is passed and is in effect. Bill 2664 will be on the council's agenda for its next meeting. Thank you. Moving last, first readings to Bill 2666 is before the council and concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Bill 2666, made by Councilmember Bertolino, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2666.
Bill 2666, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an agreement on behalf of the city with Olympus Political Consulting Services, LLC, for legislative consulting services, first reading.
Thank you. Mr. Garetano, I know we discussed this in work session. Is there anything further you want to mention relative to Bill 2666?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I was going to suggest if there's interest in a second reading, I think that having the city be represented as soon as possible, given the legislative session has already started, would help in the success of us securing funds. And also, I feel very confident because this was the lowest cost option for the city. So I think we're getting a very good deal for our citizens.
Okay, thank you. Before we do a motion, if anyone wants to make it, I'm sorry, did you say you were making a motion for a second reading, Councilmember Garetano?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, so before we do that, if you'll hold for just a moment, I want to make sure there are no questions or comments on the bill as presented. All right, seeing none, motion for second reading has been made. And then the second is by Councilmember Dodwell. As I just mentioned, this will take a 2/3 majority vote, supermajority, given that we'll be doing 2 readings in the same evening. We'll do a voice vote first and see where that goes. All in favor of the motion for second reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
We have one opposed, Councilmember Flasher. Any other opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2666 a second time.
Bill 2666, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an agreement on behalf of the city with Olympus Political Consulting Services, LLC, for legislative consulting services, second reading.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on the bill, Councilmember Edens.
Yes, thank you. I would like to amend the bill.
Okay,
Just
how would
one-
you like to amend it?
Yes, that during the term of agreement with the city of Wildwood, that Olympus Political Consulting, also known as Jake Silverman, does not partake in any political consulting activities.
I'm assuming you're talking about in Missouri or?
Yes, in
Correct.
Missouri.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I could also add, since he offered to during the work session, nor take another city as a principal client.
Okay. And to not take another principal city as a client, I believe with a conflict of interest is the way that was worded. Or was it, Mr. Silverman, no municipality or no municipality? Okay.
Yep,
So
I
your
just
motion
went with what he worded, but
okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Jaxie. So we'll now debate the amendment, and if it passes, we'll go either way. We'll go back to the main motion. Is there any discussion only on the amendment, which is to amend the contract, provided that there will be no political consulting in the state as to the state of Missouri, and no representation of another municipality? Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, Mayor, I believe that Mr. Silverman has already stated that he's not going to engage any other municipalities. So should that really be part of the amendment, because he's already committed to that? That's one comment. Second comment is, I think that we're overly restricting Mr. Silverman's ability to earn money if we deny him the right to engage in any other political consulting.
So as to the first of your questions, he did agree to that, but it doesn't, you can always put it in writing, and it probably doesn't hurt to do that. Relative to your second point about restricting his ability to get business and make a living, you made your point, and you can certainly vote against this if you don't agree with it on that basis. Councilmember Dodwell. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Edens.
Yeah, how this arose was just during a discussion during the interview, and so Mr. Silverman's background has included not only running campaigns, but advocating at the legislature. And so our concern was, because he's had a history of campaign consulting in Wildwood, was that there wouldn't be a future conflict of interest, like him running a campaign for someone actively running for council in Wildwood, or a council member running for another office. So that's where this arises from. And initially, I was just going to word it with, not taking, basically working on a campaign for somebody in Wildwood, but the thought came later to broaden it, because if there would be, let's say, a political candidate running in Chesterfield, that really a big part of their campaign is, I don't want the pool tax anymore. Well, that's kind of in conflict of interest. So I am totally under the impression that this was okay with Mr. Silverman based on what he offered to do during the interview, but If that's not the case, now would certainly be the time to say so, but I would still support this regardless.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, my second bite at the apple here. I believe that his contract has in it a termination clause, which
does.
says with 30 days notice, so that, again, I would not want to overly restrict Mr. Silverman's ability to do what he has to do, is to run a business. And if we feel there's a conflict, we can always institute the 30-day termination.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Roast.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, we have a very minor amount of money at stake here with the opportunity to gain substantially more. So I think we need to give this individual the opportunity to perform. And I guess I just say that as someone who started business 20 over years ago with one customer, and I was hungry, and I was very successful because I was hungry. But let's not restrict him from doing the best job he can do for Wildwood. And if he doesn't do a good job for Wildwood, we fire him on the spot. Okay? But we're talking about a minor amount of money. Let's not restrict his ability to be successful in his career and benefit Wildwood. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Garitano.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was concerned a little bit similarly like with Councilmember Bertolino, that it would be a little bit overly restrictive. I do feel comfortable with the termination clause. But, if Councilmember Edens feels strongly, then I would say that maybe is more well defined that, to prevent a conflict of interest with any of the political consulting work in Wildwood or adjoining municipalities, so that this way it covers some of that concern with the conflict of interest there.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? So the amendment is to require that the contract be amended to provide that Mr. Silverman will not engage in political consulting in the state of Missouri, and number two, will not work for another municipality during the term of the agreement with the city of Wildwood. Councilmember Bertolino.
I'm sorry, this is my third bite at this. By combining those,
so you only get two.
I know. Can I have a third?
You cannot. I'm sorry. Robert's rules. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, let's do a roll call vote on the amendment. A yes vote is for the amendment. A no vote is against the amendment. Please call the roll for the amendment.
Councilmember Dodwell.
No.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
No.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Bros. No. Councilmember Garitano.
Oh,
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Rainbow.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
No.
Councilmember Farmer.
No.
Councilmember Nyan.
No.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
No.
Councilmember Galani.
No.
Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxie.
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino.
No.
The amendment fails. So we're now back to the main motion as presented, or the main bill, I'm sorry, as presented, not amended. And I believe it has been read twice. Is that correct? Okay. Any further discussion on Bill 2666? Councilmember Bros?
Yeah, as I understand it, there's already been an agreement not to represent another municipality. Is that correct?
He said that he would not do that. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call Ms. Edens, Councilmember Edens.
Yeah, I am I am a little conflicted because my support was really tied to the amendment just with a built-in protection for the city. And I'm really surprised that the council voted against it because these were things that Mr. Silverman had already indicated that he was comfortable with doing. And I'm okay if he wanted to represent another city as long as it didn't have a conflict of interest, but he's the one that said he would take no other cities. So I don't I don't understand why we wouldn't take the opportunity to put something in writing, you know, but
I think that ship has sailed.
the ship has sailed, and I'm very morally conflicted on how to vote now. So
Fair enough. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2666.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
come back.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
No.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Sorry, is that yes?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
I was really hoping you'd forget about me, but I'll go ahead and say yes. But Jake, you go be a superstar and prove me wrong on a couple of things and get us some money and do us proud or we'll fire you. Gosh darn it.
Okay, so Bill 2666 is passed. Councilmember Dodwell.
Can I make a comment on moving forward with this particular?
Sure.
Would it be possible for either the subcommittee heads and the city directors, city attorney, mayor, and city administrator to get together with this new individual
Already in the works as soon as we're done with this
ASAP
meeting. Yep.
before he?
I mean, it's not in the works. It's going to be in the works as of tomorrow morning.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, okay, great idea. Thank you so much, Mr. Silverman, for being here this evening and welcome to the team. And we're glad to have you. Appreciate it. All right. That concludes our bills and we have no resolutions, nothing on the consent agenda. Anything under miscellaneous that any member of the council would like to mention before we go to adjournment? All right, seeing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting of the council made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember McCutcheon. It's a non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you, and thanks to everyone in the audience for being here this evening.